Good morning. I'm Henry Termeer, and I much regret not being there because this meeting, in the way that I've heard a little bit about it prior to it, is really quite an event, quite an important meeting. Really the right people coming together. Coming together at a moment in time where there is a tremendous amount of activity. And of course it is just the first mile in this marathon. We have thousands of rare diseases. And what we're discovering is if we focus on these rare diseases, we can make a big difference. We can actually create treatments. We can change the life for these patients, for these families. And increasingly that's starting to become acceptable and started to become an assumption. And as a result, over the last 10, 15 years, an industry has developed. And we're all sorting out what that means. I was asked to make a comment about sustainability. Is this sustainable? Can we just accumulate all of these treatments that are relatively expensive? And of course that's a very interesting question. A question that's not just a question for industry. That's a question for all of us in society. We have a chance to truly change the lives of thousands, millions of patients that have very rare diseases that nobody really had the time to focus on in the past. This has to be sustainable. The reason this will not stop is that the patients, the families, will not allow us to stop to do these developments. Patients are represented to some extent in this meeting, and they will make this point. It is a very simple question. If you have a horrible disease, you're born with a horrifying genetic disease, and you can do something about that as a society, you just do it. You don't start negotiations. Can we afford it? Can we sustain it? How do we reprioritize? You get on with it. Yes, this is a sustainable environment. But there are clearly things that we have to learn about what to do. As a company, we have to think about this as something where we should have an objective, an aspiration to make a big difference. Not a small difference, not a palliative difference. To change the cause of disease and to really make patients that have no future, give them a future. If we do that as a company, the ability to afford it for society is relatively straightforward. But that's a responsibility that is not just for people outside the company. We have to figure out what access means. Because if we are treating patients, and if patients really are allowing us to focus with them on these diseases, we have to make sure as a company, when we are in the middle of this, that we look at this very comprehensively. Not just treating the patient that may have an insurance situation that is very beneficial. Treating all patients. Not just treating the patients in the United States, but treating patients outside the United States, where maybe healthcare systems are different, more difficult to penetrate. Finding ways to do that. Creating registries that allow all of us to see that yes, we're making a big difference, not a small difference. And also admitting when something doesn't work as well, that the value is quite different. The sustainability question is a question that often gets thought about when we extrapolate these very large numbers that do occur in these kinds of ultra rare diseases and extrapolate them over the millions of patients that may have these kinds of diseases. That's an unfair way to look at this market. That's not how it will work. Every year we will make some diseases. We will create some treatments for some diseases. We won't treat 7,000 diseases over the next 20 years. We'll treat every year maybe 10, 15 more. And what a great victory that would be if we do. And we will work together. And I think this meeting is particularly effective in that way. We have payers represented here, we have patients represented here, we have research organizations represented here, we have regulators represented here. Together we will work. And we are also internationally represented here because rare diseases, ultra orphan diseases, is not a US phenomenon, is a global phenomenon. When we at Genzyme came up with the first treatment for Gaucher disease, we treated patients very early on, even still in the regulatory cycle, all around the world, and did that as a normal course. And we didn't necessarily have to look for these patients in a place like Vietnam or Tanzania or Russia. Patients found us. That's 20, 30 years ago. Patients find us much easier today. The internet is a tremendously effective vehicle to guide patients to where maybe there is a treatment available. So in this environment, for the next 2 days, we can really exchange some thoughts and come back together next year and to see what have we been able to create in terms of further effective treatments. And when the question comes up, is this an effective value, an effective price for a treatment? Let's be transparent about it. Let's talk about what it means, what we do. What value are we creating? You know, in gene therapy, for instance, which has a very, very interesting potential for a number of very tough single gene disorders. In gene therapy, treatments could be relatively expensive, but there would be lifelong effects or very long-term effects. And we need to work together to understand what that means in terms of making such a therapy work. I remember at Genzyme, we worked, I think, for 20 years and still today under Sanofi. The company is still working on gene therapies. And for at least 20, 30 years, it did not work. We couldn't get it to work. We did 9 clinical trials in cystic fibrosis in gene therapy. Never worked. We had some hope in gene therapy that we would make a difference, that we really would get something going. I became very familiar with a family where cystic fibrosis was a big problem. I became determined that if we could do something after the gene had been established and defined, that we would do it. I still have that determination. We're still not there. But tremendous progress is being made in this disease because people keep working at it. The investments required. At Genzyme, we invested, at least through public vehicles, over $200 million on failed clinical trials in this disease. The accumulated knowledge of those so-called failures has allowed us, as a field, today to come up with treatments that's starting to make truly a difference for this disease. In the next 20 years, it is very possible that indeed for many of these kinds of diseases, we will treat the disease in a real way. We will treat the underlying cause of the disease, and patients will be able to be stabilized and no longer be patients for those particular diseases. The president started an initiative with personalized medicine, and we sometimes get this a little bit confused. What's the difference between an orphan drug and a personalized medicine? There's no difference. Personalized medicine is a mechanism, a way to maybe still do things better. It's not easy to do. We've been treating patients on a patient-by-patient basis forever. Personalized medicine, that's how we have done things forever. Through technology, we're going to be able to do that better. And the only reason that that could become important if it treats patients in a better way than we were able to treat them in the past. It will not push away other broader-based treatments if the other broader-based treatments are effective. So what will this industry look like in the future? First of all, imagine this to be very much the beginning of the development of whatever we would call it, an industry. There is so much to be done. Investments are fortunately flowing into this effort. So in the future, this industry will be larger than it is today. It will grow. There will be more efforts. And these efforts are likely to be conducted in a fragmented way. So this is an ideal environment for entrepreneurs. It starts with a patient family taking an entrepreneurial role in figuring out who can really help me, coming up with some treatment for a disease. And in this room there are examples of that having happened. And I know personally a lot of examples. More of that will happen because it will be more clear what can be done by individuals to get the right resources together. In environments like in Boston or throughout the country where biotechnology is really growing and thriving, we will see entrepreneurial activities that are specifically focused on coming up with a treatment for a disease, for a specific disease. Because economically, you can visualize that that makes good sense. So investors will support such initiatives. Similarly, in academic medical centers, which I think are very much in the middle of this. Let me maybe explain that for a minute. This is not about companies necessarily being able to get something done. This is not necessarily about a patient or patient family being able to get something done. This is about these forces coming together, allowing people that are the best equipped to get something going in this area to do the work. And in my view, the academic medical centers really have a unique role to play here. I think that role can be played out more comprehensively in the future. They look the patient in the eye. They understand the science. They understand the trends of the science. And they are often very well equipped to communicate with others in the same space. The biggest problem in orphan drugs is that there is often around a single disease not a large community, not a lot of critical mass or momentum. People need to seek out those that are specifically focused on something. And that's why I like the academic medical centers. I'm personally, I've been on the board of Mass General in Massachusetts for many years. And I see a growing set of activities in that environment that lead me to believe that if we continue to organize more around that, that in the future we will come up with better solutions, better finance solutions for highly specific diseases. So the future is going to be extremely bright. It needs to be, because we have these diseases to be solved. And we can solve them because the technology and the science is allowing us to think of ways to attack these diseases. And we have the organizational infrastructure, both through companies, through patient organizations, through academic medical centers, and now increasingly also through payers that are becoming much more sophisticated about this. Payers, and payers are represented in this room, payers are not against supporting diseases and treatments for diseases that really work, that make a great difference. They have the exact same purpose as a company would have, or as a physician would have. They accommodate, they facilitate. And I think now, because this is becoming more of a world that we all started to understand and want to participate in, we are no longer going to surprise payers and providers with certain solutions that are very expensive and not budgeted. We have a time, we can work together over years before something comes to market. So there too, there is, I think, an experience growing that will allow us not to be confrontational with each other, but work together to get something done, and to get something done in a way that is affordable over time. Same with regulators. The FDA, represented also in this room, will play a very, very important role in bringing forward some of these diseases as therapies as they become available. They are looking for ways to educate themselves. They're looking for ways to become more efficient. They're looking for ways to speed up. And there are many examples that we can all point to. And in this meeting again, we will hear some of the initiatives that the agency is undertaking. No different in Europe. I've had negotiations in China around orphan drugs, in Japan around orphan drugs. Europe set up a mechanism to treat orphan drugs more effectively. So the future is indeed bright for this area. Just a great example of that to me, and then I can close off, is this meeting. This meeting brings together people, numerous people in this space that are interested, that know something about it and know that others can help them execute in this space in a more effective way. So I'm very glad you've been given this soapbox for a few minutes. I've been involved with orphan drugs for quite a long time now. I've always felt it was an area of tremendous promise, and today I feel this promise is really starting to get some momentum, and I very much look forward to continue to cooperate with everybody that tries to help this momentum continue. Thank you all very much. Have a great meeting. We'll talk soon again.